Dear me. Well, let's try that again. Sploosh! There we go. Hi, everybody. It's one of those Tuesdays. Welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips. With me, your host, Anne, Disembodied Hands, Quindy, Disembodied Beard, John, and Kiki in the other room, who is sulking because the gate is in front of our door because she knocked the screen out yesterday. The solution is important. It is important. You're right. Absolutely. There we go. Super. So yeah, we're working on a vampire barbarian today, just for fun, right? Just for funsies. So let us go. I am low key today. Yesterday, I had the highest sleep score on my Fitbit I have ever had, and you saw how I was, like energy. But when you have that immense, awesome sleep score, and then the next day you have just like, you have like 10 levels lower. You feel it. Like I haven't even checked my Fitbit, but I can bet you that it's 10 levels lower, or at least like significant, like say 7 to 10 levels lower. I'm gonna check. My Fitbit, sometimes I think my Fitbit is like full of it, but often my Fitbit is absolutely correct. Let's see. Yeah, I was 92 yesterday. I was 81 today. I was right. 11 levels. It's so huge. Like sleep makes such a difference, you guys. Like when I get sleep, I can rule the world. When I get good sleep, but just barely good sleep, then I'm like, all right, it's a day. You have that feels? Is that it feels for any of you? Feels? I do like the sleep score for my Fitbit. It does seem to actually have a direct correlation to how much energy I have. Ah, Quindy, ah! Sleep score! I'm not as addicted to my sleep score as I used to be. I broke that, but I do still like to kind of look at it. I guess every morning what my sleep score is based on my energy level and general awakeness level. And usually I'm right in the ballpark. So I think my Fitbit, there's something to it. Vampirian, absolutely. He's fabulous. All right, actually, I have foggy glasses. This is not good. Did you snoodle my glasses, Bubba? So I went and looked at that Colorful Kraken Kickstarter. They're very about their branding, aren't they? Not that that's a bad thing, but I was surprised. I told Davis this last night because I read over their Kickstarter. I glanced at it before and I read more into it this time. I'm really surprised that you hire like some of the best names in miniatures, like Mark Maskelins, and then you ask them to speed paint. I'm like, quizzical wolf noise. Cue quizzical wolf noise here. But I guess that's what it was about. So it was the Kickstarter is mostly speed techniques, which is fair. Yeah. But it always seemed weird to me. It was kind of like, actually, Reaper got the same kind of look from, you guys remember Laszlo, who's a very good mini painter in his own right. When they hired me and then asked me to speed paint a bunch of stuff for the catalogs, for, oh God, I don't even remember, but it was when you actually had like physical catalogs with pictures of minis that went out to stores back in the dark ages. We're going to limber up our Necromancer purple, by the way. I'm going to see how red I can manage to get with this. I may decide to go off of our limited palette just to punch the red up on this guy, or I may not. But I'm going to mix a midtone and a shadow and a highlight. So I'm putting 4 drops of Necromancer purple in each of 3 wells. And the reason I'm doing 4 drops for each of those is that this is a fairly weak color. It's got a lot of red pigment and magenta pigment in it. And those pigments are not known for coverage. And they're not known for diffusion either. So yeah, it's like they didn't quite know what they wanted to be, Quindy. I mean, they still made $500,000, right? So go, Colorful Kraken. But yeah, it was interesting. I mean, definitely people want that, right? Like, oh, it's an amazing mini painter and they can paint an amazing model in 90 minutes. Although I'm kind of like, fail on setting expectations. Make no mistake, guys. My book is going to set expectations. So if you're looking for 90 minutes and paint like a model that takes me 12 hours, no. My book is all about like teaching you the techniques that you can then develop and showing you the progression so that you can see from your little baby beginner steps how you can slowly improve all the way up to amazing, right? That's what my book is going to be about, right? Because I feel like the thing that approach, the speed print approach, like they're going to get more money, right? They're going to get more people subbing because gamers want that. They absolutely want that. They want to be able to put out models fast, especially GW gamers, right? Really good looking models fast is where they're at. Hey, Dogfather, thank you for the resub, 43 months. But I think a lot of people, like my audience is like in this, like maybe you also game. And so, you know, knowing us the simple techniques, like the basic techniques are going to kind of be speed techniques. They're going to be really simple. Simple ways to just set up your miniature to not look awful, right? But mostly I'm about like this hobby is so good for stress relief and it's so good for your mental and it's so good to get out of your mental box every once in a while, right? Like all of the things that mini painting can do for you on a mental health level. You know, I'm into that. And a lot of people come to this hobby as like an escape, right? They want to get away from that pressure, and speed painting an army in a week is pressure. So, you know, or a month or 3 months, whatever is the latest like goal for how long to take to paint your army. Yeah, well, I mean, that's what these books are about, right? They're grabbing a lot of the really best European painters and they're saying, okay, tell us what you can do in 90 minutes. What techniques are you using? And they still turn out a great miniature in 90 minutes. If you're on Instagram and you follow Mark Masklins, you saw pictures of his Kreed, which actually got David to buy a box of Kreed now for Tau for 40K. And that's the Kreed that he did for the book. And it looks fantastic. It looks great. Like if you could get that result in 90 minutes, sure. Heck yeah. So I definitely see the appeal. It's just not where, like, I think I'm aiming more for the crowd that like would like to get slightly better than they are, or maybe very better than they are, depending on the person, but who also comes to the hobby as like a refuge from daily life. Either somebody who has not been creative before or who is creative and is looking for a new outlet. That's maybe a little bit easier than some of the other outlets that require a lot more upfront learning. Like I said, this is like this is like a coloring book in 3D. If you want to use it that way, stuff like that. All right, so I essentially did 1 drop of brown liner into my Necromancer purple to create a shadow. I did 1 drop of white into my Necromancer purple to create a highlight. I'm probably going to want something in between here, but I'm going to mix these up and see how they look. Yeah, their 90-minute miniature bypasses my 8-hour midi. And that's the thing, right? That's where I'm talking about expectations. The whole setting expectations thing. It's like that, it's like the meme, right? Like GW's meme. The GW terrain meme, okay? The GW terrain meme was, you start with like some pieces of cardboard and gravel and, you know, stuff like that. In the second one, you've got styrofoam set up to make your little crater, right? Your piece of terrain. You got your blocks of styrofoam and your materials. And then the third picture is, it's all done and it looks fantastic. And you never get to see like how you get from chunks of styrofoam. It's like the how to draw an owl meme, right? Like here's 2 circles, like do 2 circles on top of each other, do a triangle for your beak. And then the end is this finished, you know, beautiful drawing of an owl. And they never show you the in-between steps. That's the meme, right? Seth Godin talks about that in one of his books. I think it's The Gap, actually, that he talks about that. And it's funny. But yeah, so I'm kind of like, well, those of us who have been painting for decades or who paint a lot, like are freelance painters, like many of those guys are, putting in a lot of hours. We've got amazing brush control. We can execute very quickly, you know. So this is creating kind of a raspberry color, a raspberry barbarian. I might still choose to like saturate it a bit. So that's our raspberry color. It is very pretty. but it maybe isn't. I do like this dark color though. This, whenever you're looking for a really cool kind of transparent color to shade reds and purples with, guys, reds and reddish purples especially, try just dropping a drop of brown liner in there. I find that it creates there's just a range of beautiful colors because of that more transparent black pigment. It really kind of gives you, like, this is a beautiful, like, kind of mulberry color almost, and then you've got this scaling up here. Now, yeah, 90 minutes you might be done with base coating. Right, Carrie Michael, right. Well, and some people, like, I mean, there are definitely a lot of people who do want to paint very fast. Like I said, they're painting because they want to get a unit done, or they want to get a bunch of monsters for their D&D game done and all that, right? So I think that a book of high-level speed painting techniques, as this book is pretty useful for a fairly large percentage of the market. But I would rather personally do a book that teaches you guys the techniques, because the fact is that if you learn the techniques, pardon me, I'm crooked again. I'm always crooked. If you put the time into learning the techniques, your brush control gets better, your knowledge of paint gets better, and eventually you can do that speed paint because you've just nailed the brush control and paint consistency aspects. You know the techniques, and you can adapt them. So, so I feel like I want to head into... I'm probably going to write the intro to this book, or the first chapter, on the plane. I wasn't going to take my computer with me to Hawaii at all, and then I realized, I have 6 hours there and 6 hours back. And the 6 hours there is like in the morning and early afternoon, which is my most productive mental time. So I just added a little bit of this color, which has a lot more white in it, into this color, and that's to increase opacity a little bit. Now, I think that for a vampire, I am going to want more of a punchy color. I definitely wanted to use reds on this guy because his skin has that green tone. So I think this is where I go outside of my box. And when you're doing a limited palette scheme, feel like fully emboldened to go outside of your box. Like, if you really are like, okay, limited palette, yay. And then you do it and you're like, I really wish that was a punchy red instead of a muted purpley red. Like, just grab the red, just go. Who cares? Who's judging you? Just because you said that you were doing limited palette doesn't mean you have to stay doing limited palette. If you want to do a different color, do it. Is it impressive to paint a whole model limited palette? Sure it is. Does anybody other than you really care? No. So always keep, like, and again, this is setting expectations, right? So we're gonna, I want to do the loincloth this color and see how it looks. I'm gonna use my middle color. I'm gonna put it, it's thinned, so I'm taking advantage of the zenith. But I feel like this just is gonna be a little too purple and not as saturated as I wanted it to be. So now, let's grab our fire red, which is the closest thing. Now I have to go clear red right now on my plate because I put all my reds in the other room because I'm silly. I'm going to use fire anyway because it's a little bit colder. I'm going to thin it down. I'm going to do probably a 2-to-1. So yeah, I'll still use probably all these. I'll use these limited palette colors to mix what I want. Heading forward on most of the model, but just because I like the challenge, I like the fun. But if I want this red, I'm going to use this red. Simple. Because we're already pushing it in that our vampire is actually a barbarian that we're turning into a vampire, and I need some white. Sorry, I need to underpaint for this one, I think. So I do want to go traditional vampire on some of it, and that means red and black and bone. Red, black, bone, gold, probably. In which case, the blue and green that I grabbed are likely only used on the skin tone to mix and to mix like complements. Complementary shadows. Let me drop a little bit of water into this white. Because I want to essentially underpaint to get some brighter red. Because I could layer this red up over this purple, and I will, but then when I'm inevitably unhappy with how little it's shifting, I will underpaint. So I'm preparing my white for that. But yeah, it was good to see that Kickstarter just because I understand, you know, what's out there. I contacted a print-on-demand place this morning, because I was looking at the one that I really like in the UK, but they don't have as many options for, like, some of the higher quality options. Like, if I wanted to do coated paper or something, they don't have that. And, because at least they don't have it here. They do everything in the UK, but their American operation is not fully expanded yet. So I went looking. I found a place here in California that apparently is one of the top national places to do this. So I have a query into them to see what kind of pricing they can give me. It's not going to be as good as Book Vault, though. That's the thing, is I really don't think they're going to be able to match it. So, all right. So I'm just popping in some red here. My red is a little transparent. I'm just going to pop it in on the bottom here. I'm going to leave the purple up here in the shadow because I like it. Now it's getting, whoa, Technicolor. So what we're running into here is what I tell you guys a lot is saturated versus very muted, right? His skin tone is extremely muted. So we're already seeing, especially because the gamma is turned up on my freaking computer here, but we're already seeing a little bit of clashing. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm like, one of the cardinal rules, if you follow no other cardinal rule of color, well, other than obviously alternate light and dark, but if you follow no other rule of color after that, it has to be, remember that muted colors and really bright saturated colors clash with each other. Like, they will fight. There are ways around it, but in general, if you are having a color malfunction and you have used a saturated bright color next to a very, very muted color, grayed out color like this skin tone, the reason you're having that problem is that you are using something that's too bright. So what can I do and still keep this in the right area? I can add just a little bit of this to take it down just a peg. You don't have to mute it a lot, but you have to mute it a little bit. And you can experiment to see how much you need to. Yeah, maybe. I love Book Vault. Like, Book Vault is, like, top-notch. And their pricing is just wonderful. Like, their pricing is better than anything I saw. And that's key, right? Because the more you have to pay for a copy of the book, the higher you have to raise the price in order to cover everything else. Like shipping, or shipping to you, essentially, if you're fulfilling. And stuff like paying yourself for all the work that you've done. And, you know, if you're in with a partner like Reaper, then you've got to make sure they get a cut for all the work they're doing, right? And so the higher the initial base price, the higher everything goes. I think keeping it at a paperback is going to help. And I don't want to go super, super premium art book on it, because that'll just, like, charge you guys. I don't want to charge too much, like, for packaging the knowledge, I guess, is if you put it that way, right? Don't want to charge my fan base for packaging. I want it to be a nice book, but it does not have to be super, super. What is Red Violet? Red Violet is a fairly intense color. I would put it on the more saturated side. It has no white in it. It has no black in it. It has a bit of blue and a bit of magenta. A lot of magenta, actually. So I would say that Red Violet is a saturated red. It's a little dark, which is what keeps it from being a hyper-saturated red, like fire. And it's the blue and the magenta pigment in it that are giving you that darker tone. So I'm messing around. Essentially, this is my proof of concept. I'm going to mess around with my purple and my red until I can figure out something that works. And it is bothering me because it actually doesn't look quite as bad in person as it is on my screen up there, because my computer is just punching the gamma up a lot. I keep meaning to go and mess with my color settings for my monitor. It's the one thing that really annoys me. When it doesn't look the same on my monitor as it does looking at it in person, I get really annoyed. I'm going to bring this red up a little bit, just on the folds. Now putting this over Zenith and keeping it transparent is also helping to mute it a bit. It's not reading as bad in person as it is on the camera. But yeah, violet red is its own, is a pretty saturated red, all things considered. And I mean, you can tell when you put it in the palette, it still looks like a fairly bright red. Like, just make your judgment call. You don't want to overthink this. I know overthinking is the national sport of miniature painters, no matter where they are. But essentially, if it looks like it's a pretty bright color, it's a pretty bright color. If it looks like it's pretty grayed out, it's pretty grayed out. If it looks somewhere in the middle, then it's a muted color. It's just not extremely muted. Like if you're looking at Harvest Brown, Harvest Brown's fairly saturated brown, but it's still a brown, so it's still muted. Really, when it comes down to really bright colors, you mostly are dealing with the clear brights and then the other selection of fairly bright reds, blues, etc. So like things like blood red, even though it is muted compared to clear red, it's still pretty saturated red. Same with red violet. When in doubt, put it next to a gray and put it next to like a clear color and ask yourself which it has more in common with. It's one trick. I have to decide if we're gonna make this red fade out at the bottom. Actually, that will help a lot. So let's think about doing that, doing some weathering on this. And for a barbarian, it would totally be suitable. So I am actually going to not underpaint. I am going to block in other areas that I want to be this color. And when I have studs or straps up here, I'm just going to paint over them. I can always get them later. Mostly I just want to block in these colors. Now up here, I am going to keep the red brighter because I've got a lot of straps and studs that are interfering with the area. And so by the time I paint all those in, there's actually not going to be very much red showing at all, which means I'm going to want it to be more saturated or brighter or it won't show. Let's see here. We definitely want to do... I want to experiment. Where's my Necromancer? Necromancer, I want to mix Necromancer and Sharkbite and see what I get. Oh, and take your allergy pill, Wendy. I'm really sniffly today. I need to blow my nose. I have the window open because I really want... It's supposed to be warmer out, and I really want the house to stay cool. And I think I've decided to tie my Patreon completely into the YouTube and book development for this year. So, like, whatever topic I'm covering on the YouTube fundamentals, I'm also, obviously, I'm going to be for the $2 PDF. But I'm also going to do things related to that topic for the $5 and $10 levels. Yeah, right? Yeah, I'm seeing her sniffling. You'd think I would remember to actually, like, grab a Kleenex. So I want to do some color mixing. I want to see if I can get a purple for this side armor. I could do blue as well. But the more colors other than, like, red and black that I do on this model, the less vampire. We want to double down because we're doing a non-standard. It's not a woo vampire mini. We want to definitely be careful other colors we put on. So I think I can get away with maybe a dark purple. So I'm gonna mix 2 drops of Sharkbite with 1 drop of Necromancer and see what I get. Just cause, and maybe with a little bit of brown liner. But let us mix up this color and see what we get. Color mixing is one of the great joys of life. If you just play with it, if you just keep it playful and you don't get too serious about it. So that's a muted purple. It's a bit, you see how it's grayed out? You can definitely tell that it's a muted purple. I want to add a little bit of my brown liner and Necromancer mix in there. I don't know if it's different enough. Maybe it is. So adding the brown liner plus Necromancer mix made it darker. I think I'm going black with the cloth. I'll go like bone with the fur. Yeah, I'll try this purple. The purple is also a fairly vampire color. You know, it's in that range of evil colors. I'm going to pop it in on these side leathers. He's dyed his leather with berry juice, so I'm just going to go there. He's a more fashion-conscious barbarian. Now, what I'm going to want to do probably is make sure that I'm going to have to make sure I've got contrast, but I have fur here and also like bound areas, and so I can put different colors in there. I'm going to go black with the cloth, which is a little skirting down here. I might go black with the leather as well. We need to make him vampiric enough is essentially where we're at. And to make this purple work with this red, I'm probably going to have to make this purple a lot darker and bring the red up. Yes, he's a vampire, right? Right, that's why he's a fashion-conscious barbarian. This makes sense. I know. Okay, cool, Quiddy, you got me. I just don't have much brain today. With an 81 sleep score, it means I'm functional and not much else. It's a good thing that I don't have a whole lot of brain-intensive activity to do today. I do have to map out a new PDF, but I'm not too intensive. So these are now we can see these are very different purples, but they work. This one is colder and darker. This one is redder and lighter. So they're not fighting, especially because they've got a separator, right? And what I can do to double down on this is I can make this separator more of a light kind of straw color or natural leather color and go that way, or I can make it black and make the little strands, the little ties that it's bound with, make those more of a leather color. Probably do the whole thing, but we'll see. But yeah, so these are not, even though they're close together on the color wheel, and technically, if we throw a yellow onto this, like if we're using a straw color for anything, for our leather or anything like that, or we're doing NMM gold, then we're doing a split complementary, right? Because we've got a reddish purple and a bluish purple, and then we'll have the yellow opposite it. So you can make, even though it seems like split complementaries are doomed to fail because they're so close and things close to each other on the color wheel tend to fight, there are ways to get around that. Most times you're going to have to do a little more than this. You're going to have to make one of these significantly darker and make one of them significantly lighter. And we are going to be lightening up the redder one and darkening the bluer one. So that fits. Runic purple is really red. If you're going to use a purple next to that green skin, I wouldn't use a red purple, I don't think. And also it's probably the same, it's the same value. So if you were going to use a purple, use a light one. Like add white to that. But I find that with the green, like with that green skin, if you're working with Naga... Oh, wrong one. So yeah, so if you look at this, you can see right away that Naga is really, really saturated. And you can see that actually Runic is a little bit muted. So that's probably your biggest thing. What I would do is go with a darker purple if you're going to go with a purple. If you want a red purple, then the darker one would be Monarch. See how those are better? Those don't clash. You could even highlight your monarch with a little runic and you'd probably still be okay. But you're going to have to go significantly lighter or darker on that, I think. Runic is a sneaky color because it looks saturated, but it actually is a bit muted. And you can see it there on the top. Like, it's fair, but it's not as bright as this. You can just see it. So, sometimes you just have to hold the bottles up next to each other before you paint. And kind of make a gut assessment if this looks wrong. But when in doubt, like I said, you can use saturated and muted together, but you need to light and dark them. Like, with the skin being so saturated, it counts as an accent color. So, make everything else really dark or really light and muted. And you're going to be okay. So, like I said, this is a hard one to learn, but if you master this, your color woes are over. Because you're going to be able to, like, always remember your light-dark contrast. Yeah, we are gonna fuzz this out a bit. Yeah, the cyan blue is also really vibrant, though. If you're using cyan blue to highlight it, yeah, that's working with your green. The purple is what's fighting. Use a really saturated purple, or, like I said, go with that. And the monarch is extremely saturated, even though it's dark. Yeah, monarch is your go-to. Do you have clear purple? Essentially, do you have any, like, saturated purple? Arc Lord, I think is a really magenta-y purple. Am I correct about that? Is it more vibrant, more saturated than the runic purple? But it's going to be lighter. I think it's just... I might lean heavily into the black on that blue-black leather and go with... Because you've got a light to mid-green. So you could still go with a mid-dark purple. I would hesitate to go with a lighter... To go with a purple that's close to your skin tone in shade, in value. It's just, in my brain, it's going, you could probably make it work. But you'd be surprised, you can put dark colors next to each other as long as one is near black and one is like a mid-dark, and you'll be fine. But, there are some times when you're color mixing that if you don't own the color, you gotta mix something close to it. That's why I asked if you had clear purple. If you had, okay. Lighter than the runic purple. Weird? It shouldn't be. Clear purple was always looked darker, but shake it up and... That's weird that clear purple looks lighter than runic. Like, it shouldn't. Runic purple's a pretty dark, clear purple's a fairly dark color. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. If Arc Lord's lighter, it's gonna have white in it. I think you might want to add a little of the Arc Lord or Runic to the clear purple, is what I was getting to, Agent Marble. Hopefully we didn't get totally dumped on by the frame rate there. So that's what I was getting at, is because clear purple is extremely saturated, you can use it to add saturation and punch to other colors. And since it's darker, and I'm inclined to think that you should go darker, you might be able to get away with lighter, but I'm thinking you should go kind of mid-dark and then highlight with your runic. Rather, essentially, that's what I'm getting at. When you want to use a color, it's not working. And one of the reasons it's maybe not working is because it's a bit muted, and maybe it's also a little close in value to another color you're using, and maybe you need a little bit more contrast. One thing you could do is like to start with clear purple with a little bit of that runic purple or Arc Lord mixed in, and then, because that's going to be much more saturated, and it's going to be darker, but it's not going to be super dark, so it should still work against your blue-black, assuming that your blue-black is actually black, and it's not it's not getting too blue. Yeah, so essentially if you don't have Monarch, the next best thing is clear purple plus a reddish purple. Is kind of my point. But yeah, you can get trapped into a saturated color scheme. You can absolutely get trapped into one. Like where you use a saturated color like the Naga, and then you realize everything else, it's trapped you in there. You actually, your color options have gone low. You have, despite what you may think, you have many more color options when using a slightly muted color scheme than you do with bright colors. So that's why I'm like, treat that skin tone as an accent, go more muted with everything else. But with the cyan blue that you're using to highlight your blue black, or to be in your blue black, that's going to push you really saturated too, because that's a primary. So you're essentially pumping a lot of saturation into that model. It limits you very much as to what you can do unless you really play with your darks and lights. And I find that darks will often go a little better. You could post a picture of it on the Discord, and I'll see when I can get to it, but in works in progress or feedback wanted. And then I can see directly what you've got going on. And because seeing that, I can guess. I can kind of like put those colors together in my head. But I'm going to give you better feedback if I see it. So I'm using some of my Necromancer Purple plus Brown liner to add shadows to this, which is essentially a very muted purple color. So it helps me to mute down things. You can also start with a very saturated color, but then use muted colors to like glaze it and shade it and highlight it and take a lot of its saturation out. That's what I'm thinking with my little loincloth up here, is I'm going to fade out the bottom as if it's worn. Let's see what I want to do with this belt. I think I want the leather arm thingies to be... Do I want them purple or red? I think I want them... I want red on these stringy things, that's for sure. The stringy things. But yeah, it's funny because, I mean, myself included, many painters start out really preferring to use saturated colors, brighter colors. But then as you paint, as you really get into the hobby and as you explore it a bit, you get kind of bored with them. And then you're like, maybe I want to try some olive green. Maybe I want to try some gray blue. You know, you get there and then you learn to enjoy muted colors. But I mean, when I started out, I was a very Games Workshop painter, which I was painting Games Workshop for eBay, so it was good that I was a GW-ish palette, which usually is very saturated, very punchy. But then I got, because I was looking at a lot of Jennifer's work, and she was doing a lot of pastels and desaturated colors, I started playing with a little bit more of a muted color scheme, and I started really liking it. And now I can go either way. There are different things to watch out for, different dangers in color choice between those two things. And you can use bright next to muted, but like I said, you have to make it an accent color. What that means is you're limiting the amount of space it takes up, and you're actively trying to work away from it as far as contrast level, usually with value, i.e. lights and darks. But as it's a witch, I don't know that I would go very light unless I was using some bone colors or something on it. I think a light purple is probably just going to not work real well because you're already using Dungeon Slime. Now, Dungeon Slime and Icy Violet can work pretty well together. It just depends. It really just depends. Like I said, pop a picture up in my Discord and I will get to it. I've got a lot on my plate this week, obviously getting ready to go on vacation, so I'll do what I can. I may get to it actually sitting at the airport on Saturday, but I'll get to it. Airports are great for my Discord because, like, I'm looking for something to do. Oh yeah, I should check Discord to respond to everybody. So we've got that setting up, and then we'll get more red in there. And there's a lot of straps back here. It's not going to make much room for the color to show through, sadly. But yeah, I mean, color, you guys have seen me change a color if it's not working before on a miniature, so it's not like even at my level you ever get absolutely perfect with choosing your colors unless you're using a predictable color scheme that you've used a lot before. And to be fair, when you do get to my level of, like, been in the hobby this long, you do tend to have a lot of color schemes that you've used before that you know will work, so you can always reach for those. But every once in a while, you want to switch it up. And that's where the funsies come in, where you can trip up even if you're me. But the thing is that as you get more experienced, if you do trip up and if something isn't working, you're able to analyze why. It really is all contrast. Like, either your colors are too close together, or one of your colors is too saturated and the other one's too muted. I am going to close my window because the world is attacking me. Allergy. Something is out there that's really getting me today. Okay. Boop. I'm going to grab my driftwood brown. Cool. Yeah, never be afraid to, like, post your stuff on my Discord, though. I mean, even before I get to it, like, Ruben or Amy or somebody else might chime in to help you, and they're often gonna have the same advice that I would put in. I mean, that's why it's great to be a patron, right? Is the Discord is automatic, an automatic benefit. So I'm going to get my driftwood brown. Yeah, we're going off palette. I just say we're going off palette. Limited palette was great until it clashed with what I really wanted to do with the model, and then I was like, okay, we're done. Still cool that I used it to do the skin tone, and I still love the skin tone, but now I need to double down on the rest of this stuff. We'll just do limited palette at some point in the future on something that's maybe a little simpler and doesn't have a atmospheric color constraint, i.e. Halloween or vampire colors. All right. So I want to essentially take this part that's reading as hypersaturated down here near the bottom, and I want to fade it out as if it's worn, which makes sense for a barbarian. So I've got my driftwood color, driftwood brown, which you guys all... One second. My cardstock is getting in the way. All should be familiar with. There it is. It's a yellow brown. It's a light yellow brown. It's the highlight of the shield brown and Wood Stain Brown Triad. I've thinned it about 2 to 1. We're going to see if that's thin enough. And I'm pretty much just going to paint it over the bottom of this loincloth. It's a little strong. I can see the brush strokes, but I'll drop another drop of water in there. And I can blend that in. But I want to essentially do an irregular fade pattern on the bottom of this. That will help to essentially focus down this brighter red. Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, if that is your hesitancy factor, then you can work with that by just saying, hey guys, I need some feedback on what might make these colors work. Please be gentle, or something like that. Please, no hardcore critiques, please, just suggestions. I mean, feel free to ask for exactly the level of critique you want. I mean, people will listen. In the Reaper community, most people will listen. And I think in my Patreon community, they definitely will. So I'm just going to go over this a little bit more. Really fade out the bottom. I want to fade it in a bit too because I thinned it a little more. So I'm going to go up with this thinner version. So I'm going to try to disrupt this little layer that I've got. And I can stipple a bit. I will make a highlight for this as well. And what you want kind of is that kind of pinker or oranger effect. I'm getting an orange effect because my color is a yellowish brown and I'm going over red. So instead of graying it out, it's actually kind of browning it out. We could go against that if we wanted by putting some green in. Like doing a green glaze over the top, but I'm not sure that I need it. But I want that bottom edge to be faded, so Zenith. Crows, if you watch the videos of how I'm doing this model, I am using Zenith, as you can see. And in some cases, I'm a little bit ignoring my Zenith, but you can see how I've retained the black through here. And the muscles, it's especially evident. The key is thinned paint. If you're using thick paint, you're getting nothing from your Zenith. Because you need to be able to see that Zenith under your base coat in order to use it. The only other way to do it is to do Zenith and then take a picture, take a set of photos so that you can look at them and remember where your shadows were. But the easiest way to do it is honestly just to thin your base coat enough that you're able to see the Zenith through it. And then you can double down on it by painting shadows where the black is and then highlight the areas where the white is. And leave the base as the transition. That's exactly how I did these muscles. But most people who try Zenith who don't have success with it are putting their paint on too thick or they're putting too many layers so that they build up and totally lose their Zenith. And actually, if you totally lose your Zenith, it's okay after you've sketched in your shadows over that black and gotten your highlights over the white. Like eventually wiping out your Zenith and just having your shadows, midtones, and highlights is fine. But when you start out, you need to preserve that Zenith if you're going to utilize it easily. And so the key to that is to use thinner paint. Like, honestly, thinning, I mean, even if you do Master Series, like a 3 to 1. Yeah, because if you watch it, how thin my base coat paint is on this, I'm like maybe a 2 to 1, 3 to 1 paint to water. And it's see-through. You can see the Zenith through it. But I still get an even coat, and then I'm able to go and make sure that I've got shadows in where the black is. And here I just made use of it so that I could keep this in shadow, right? So that it looks like you can still see it's the skin tone, but it's in shadow. Because I'm putting it over black, and it's just giving me a more muted out, shaded tone. So I'm directly using the black primer shadows under this. Now, some of these I am not as much, although I still can see my black primer here as opposed to where my white primer is. You can definitely see that this is much darker and this is much lighter, see? And that's because I'm using a purple, and you could see that I can see through it. If you're using a well palette, this is pretty easy because you can look at it and say, can I see the palette through this? Can I see, is it lighter over the white here than it is here in the puddle? And if the answer is yes, go for it. You'll be able to see your zenith through it enough. You don't have to see it very much, but you should be able to see it so that you can double down on that and mark your highlights and shadows. I'm probably going to do zenith whenever we do a 3D print Reaper model or a metal Reaper model, because, obviously I don't prime the Bones USA ones or the Bones ones. But it's just useful, both for kind of picking out details and for like reminding you of where your light is. But really, really, like, if you don't get back to time to go back and watch, the whole point is really, that's too thick. All you need to do is use thinner paint on your base. Chances are if zenith is not working for you, you are putting your paint too thick. All right, I'm going to mix up a highlight for this because my white is too strong. It's overpowering the... I'm going to gray this out a little bit too. Where's my... No. I could use a bone color, or I could reach for wolf gray. I want to... Essentially because this is such a yellow color, it's going very, very yellow. And I don't want it to do that because I'm already feeling like we've got a lot of yellow in there. I want to gray this out. I'm going to add a little bit of wolf gray to it. If you have some other problem with zenith, other than just completely losing track of your, like, where your highlights and shadows were, then that's probably something different. And it would need a different solution. But most of the time when people try to use zenith, they're just wiping it out. Because it won't show as much. It'll show only slightly through a stronger paint. And if you have a really opaque paint that you're using as the base coat, it's just not going to show at all. You're going to lose it. Oh, that's... Okay, so the easy way to apply zenith, if you want it like this, is I lay the model down after I've done the black prime, and I just spray on an angle from the top like this. So I'm laying it down on a plate, a primer plate, and then I'm just spraying it like that. So not straight up and down, but a little bit from up above. And then I flip it over and do the same thing. I'm doing the Sergio, where it's not shaded on completely in shadow on the back, because I don't like that look. All right, did I thin this grayish color enough? Let's find out. Yeah, I did. So I'm going to gray this out. And I need to stop here and say, you don't need to zenith. Like, I don't all the time. You know that. Over Bones, I don't bother with zenith. But I do find it, like, as a useful tool, especially if I want dramatic shadows and highlights. It can force me, because I'm not naturally, I don't naturally paint that way, the way that Luca does, very high impact. I tend to like more of a softer look on my models. So I'm just layering up that grayed out color to make that faded border. So we've desaturated this a little bit is what we've done. And if I want to desaturate it more, I could even glaze with this light grayish bony color over this entire thing. But we're not going to do that unless we really need to at the end. Taking part of the red down essentially focuses that I only have the bright red here. It makes it more of an accent color because this is all muted because of the black underlying primer. It's all darker, right? We only get the punchy color up here. So you can do things like that. If you are putting a brighter, more saturated color on a larger part of the miniature, you can weather parts of that and shade parts of that to de-emphasize that saturated color and to make it very small so that it's still there, it still shows up, but it's no longer the main player on that surface. And that will keep it from being too saturated. Like, it'll limit its area. You can use it as an accent color, even though technically it takes up a lot more room. Yeah, but you don't have to use Zenith. Zenith is like a thing that I use. Like, this model was a no-brainer with Zenith because I wanted that dramatic musculature, so I went for it. And also, he's got just a lot of stuff going on. So the Zenith kind of helps, like, outline little details, like the studs on this, and the details on this strap. So Zenith can be useful, but it is not necessary. You should try it and try to learn to use it just because it's another tool in your toolbox. But you should never feel bad that you don't use Zenith. Like, you don't have to. I didn't for years. I still don't use it on a lot of projects. I use it when I specifically think it's a good fit for the project. And usually that's like, if I want a dramatic light source, I'll use Zenith to remind myself that I need to punch my highlights and shadows more than I usually do. So that's the use of Zenith for me. But it is not a necessary technique, just like wet blending isn't a necessary technique. Okay, so up here on these shoulder pads, I think I do want to pop in some bright red, but I need to get into the spaces between these straps. And it's going to be such small spaces, so I'm almost certainly going to have to do some white underpainting up here to bring that or pink underpainting to bring out these little red tiny bits against the straps. But yeah. So I'm going to do that and then bring in a little bit of my pink. But yeah, everything in miniature painting is just a tool, right? It's like, I would say that my fundamental stuff is like the stuff that it's almost a need to know. But even then, you can ignore washes. If you never learn to apply a wash, you can still paint fantastic miniatures. I almost never use washes nowadays. So like, even though washes are a fundamental, and it's something I feel like you should learn because it's a good tool for some things, even washes are not like necessary. Obviously, putting a nice base coat on, either with wet blending or with just base coating, is a necessary technique. Learning to shade and highlight some way is a necessary technique, but how you do it is up to you. And it's the same with priming. Probably because I don't know. Dry brushing is Zenith. The problem is your dry brushing has to be really good. And most people's dry brushing isn't. Like, you have to be able to do a really fine dry brush, and you've got to keep your direction on, right? You've got to keep it directional. And that's, I think, where dry brushing in Zenith is super hard. And you can airbrush it. What I would advise if you really don't like rattle cans crows is just base coat the model in black or black primer and in brush on. And then just spray your Zenith on. I do that a lot. I don't use actually a black primer a lot of the time to do the base coat. I'll just paint it. I don't use a spray black primer. Depends. And that's a way that you can also do a Zenith on Bones models that might not like primer, by the way, is just paint the Bones model black and then do the spray prime over the top, the white prime. Hey, Roger. I mean, yeah. Zenith is a tool. If you do have trouble envisioning where highlights and shadows are going to fall, then it is a tool that can help you. And I need a little bit of walnut here, or black. That way, if you that way you only have to buy one rattle can if you're just paint it black first. But yeah, Zenith is not perfect. It will not help you with your NMM, for example, but it can help you start to visualize light. Just needed some black because my primer actually didn't get underneath this shoulder. We got a little bit of blowback there. This is where I say that it's not perfect, and sometimes you have to go, nope, there would be black under this shoulder. So we got that heavy cast shadow there in black now. I mean, the other thing that you can realize is just that, you know, whatever is underneath is going to be more shaded, right? And you're already using lining, probably. You're either aligning or you're alternating really dark and really, you know, really dark with other stuff. But if you're already using lining, then, I mean, the shadows is just like anything that's under on the underside. So you can see, if you look at this model from the bottom up, you can see the underside, right? So you could just learn your highlighting and shading that way. Now at 28 millimeter, as I've said often, I will decide against realism in favor of more of a stylistic approach because it looks right. So with this scale, often it may be that what is realistic is not actually like there are other choices. It's not the only choice. So there are times I will choose to work outside of a zenith to highlight something just because, like this knife down here, it doesn't have very much primer on it, so you know it's going to be in shadow. Am I going to leave it like totally black? No, I'm not. I'm going to highlight it more than you might think based on what the zenith light is doing, because both because of bounce light and because I want this detail to come out. I want it to show up. So even when you use zenith, you're still going to have to make your own judgment calls. Just because sometimes realism is not the answer. It's not the answer that's going to look best. You still have to be more or less consistent if you're trying for a dramatic light sourcing, though. Like if I was really going to be consistent about dramatic light sourcing on this model, I would follow my zenith. And on this knife, I would make sure that I'm using only, except for this little bit of light that's leaking through here, I would use only bounced light on the rest of it. So probably a much cooler light. It's a much dimmer. I would not highlight nearly as much. Yeah, it's the rule of cool. And most of us kind of live by the rule of cool with our miniatures, right? We're not sitting there and nitpicking the light sourcing. There are painters who will do that. And one of them judges a major competition. So if you go to, I think it's the Las Vegas Open. I think it's LVO. Matt DiPietro is very, very expert in the use of lighting. And he will definitely look for that in models before he awards them a top award. That was his complaint about my model when he judged me at Kubla, was Sacrifice, where I did all the freehand. That he's like, your light sourcing is off. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's true. But some judges are much more inclined to notice that So it's just something to be aware of. It'd be the same if you were a traditional artist showing at a juried show and you knew that one of the judges was into dramatic lighting. So you knew that if you nailed your lighting, that judge would be pleased with you, right? At least on that count. If you don't care about that, then it doesn't matter what you do, and rule of cool rules. Which is the vast majority of circumstances. Or you can just be like me, and even though you know you're getting judged by Matt, you can just say, F it, I wanted to paint this the way I wanted to paint it. No, David is not nearly as hardcore. Even though David is an expert at light, when he judges, doesn't hold other people to that. Like, he's judging what he sees. But he isn't, David, I don't think, he's not judging things like really high level competition. Like, he judges at ReaperCon. I don't think he was ever like a crystal brush judge as I was. Like, there are definitely, when you're looking at a very high level, very stringent competition, that's when you see that sort of thing, Pendrake. Because if you're going to compete at like the top level at a show that really demands a high level of expertise, then you're gonna be held to that level. It's gonna be expected that if you want to win gold in an advanced level, you need to be showing mastery of certain things. So, no big apple. It just means that you don't have to like always reach for realism. You can decide that you're gonna paint something with more highlights than your zenith light says it gets, just because it will look better in your mind. And when you're heading into competitions, this is why it's good to just take them with a grain of salt. It's like if I enter that competition and I just, painted it the way I want to paint it, I know that I might not get like a gold, right? Because I'm not necessarily painting in a style. It's the same with Games Workshop. You have to paint in the GW style. And if you go into that competition painting in your own style, then you have to be that much better in order to win a demon. But this is like, when you're just painting for you, just let the rule of cool rule. Like, don't worry about it. I find it a fun challenge sometimes to use a competition to push me to doing a different style or a different sort of paint job than I normally would, just because it's good to keep it, keep growing. That's what I use competitions for. I use competitions to evolve. When Anne needs an evolution, when she needs to Pokemon evolve to the next level of Anne, then she goes for a high level competition. No, don't. No, the point is, Pendrake, if you're doing backlighting on a model, you have to do it really well if you're under matte. He's not going to judge you because you're not doing a light source that's a standard. He's going to judge you because whatever light source you chose, you didn't execute well. So whatever you chose to do, whatever light source you did, he's going to hold you to it. He's going to be like, oh, you did backlighting on this model. That's really cool. Here's where you did it really well. And here is where you really did not execute well on that. And that has cost you the gold medal, right? That kind of thing. It's just like any reality show you see. Like, we've been watching the blacksmithing show, Forged in Fire. And it's just like that. They're like, all those guys are at such a high level that the judges are like, this is the one thing you did not execute on, and it is the thing that will send you home. Right? Because we told you to do X, and you did X, but you didn't do it very well, or we told you to do X and you did Y, but you didn't excel at it. It's that kind of thing. Like I said, I use these things. People who are competitive by nature get a lot out of competitions and will grow with that. I'm not super competitive by nature. It's in my nature, but it's not like a big thing for me. So I tend to use those things as an evolution. And even if I don't win then, I've still won for me, because my purpose was to make myself paint outside of my comfort zone. So I'm putting some lining around here. Then you're just going to be essentially bottom lighting all the way around. But you better make it very obvious, Pendrake, that's what you're doing. Like the ground needs to be highlighted in such a way that you can see that the light sourcing is brighter at the outside and that it is coming from that direction. So you could do that. You could absolutely paint a model like that, and you could convey it. But you better convey it, the whole model better convey that. So you're, with torches, if it's at waist height, then you're going to be doing a directed lighting from all around the model at waist height. So you're going to see it be dimmer at the top and the bottom, and you're going to see it be angled at the top and the bottom. It's also going to be pretty dim, and you're going to have to make sure you acknowledge the color of the light. But like I said, even if your light source is not visible, it should still be obvious, like where it's coming from by the angles that the light travels on the model, right? Now, if you've got constant fill light all around, but you don't, right? Like there are still areas that won't be hit by light because you're going to be they're all at waist level or bottom level, right? So if there's a circle of fire around your model and you're doing light coming up, then there's definitely a way to paint it. If you have the light coming this way from all around, then there's still areas that the light won't reach. But that is what I would call overthinking. Like, unless you are actually planning such a model, there is no point in asking me that question. Because, I mean, it's just like a 2D painter. If a 2D painter was painting, something like that, you'd be able to tell, like, kind of where the light was coming from. You'd look at the stuff on the ground around them and how the light was bouncing off of that. You would notice that it was brighter toward the edges of the piece than where it actually hit the model. So you would assume a light source that was just off camera, so to speak. And if you are really painting something with light like all around it, that's essentially painting like the game, almost Games Workshop style, right? With it'll look like no lighting because the light is everywhere. The typical in beginning gamer paint job. I think the big thing is just to be consistent. Like, whatever light source you choose, you need to execute on that around the model equally. If you're trying to, impress, if that's what your goal is, if that's part of your goals. And if it's not part of your goals, but you're going up on a level with people who are very good at lighting, be aware that you might be graded down because you fall short on that. And that's fair. I was not very good at lighting before I met David, before I started working with David and talking to David a lot. It was the thing that I knew basic overhead lighting, I was good at it, and I never felt the need to do much else. I had done a bit of OSL, which also seemed pretty simple to me, but I hadn't really gone deep into it until I started talking to David a lot. Yes, Quindy has it on the nose. Having the lighting be consistent is what is important. Yeah, a judge that's good at lighting can tell where the light source is meant to be from where you painted. Well, yeah, Pendrake, that's the point. You totally missed my original point, which is that Matt is very good at light. He's going to be able to tell if you've executed it right. And he's not judging it from just one light position. He's looking at your piece as if he would look at a 2D painting, and he is figuring out where your light source is, and then he is applying that to all the other areas of the model to make sure that you are consistent. Exactly what Quindy said. So I'm sorry that I did not describe the concept I was trying to convey. I am definitely not as awake of an Ann today as I was yesterday. So, my communication failure. But a judge that's really good at light is going to look at your piece and they're going to be like, what are you trying to do here if you weren't consistent? They might give you points for effort, but you're not going to win a gold. Nobody is out there judging a model assuming that it needs to be overhead lighting or it needs to be this or it needs to be that. They're all judging the model you bring them. But if your light is all wonky all over the model, like you're trying to do OSL on one part, but then your lighting is weird on another part that isn't in keeping with that, they're going to judge that. So we're making the same point, Pendrake, is the point. Alrighty, so we're bringing up the reds in some areas. Where you see the faded purple up here is where the straps are. So I'm going to be painting those straps a different color. Let's get some red on this axe. Same thing up here. I've got the red pocketed in, but you see these faded areas. Those are straps. You're feeling... No, we're exactly saying the same thing, Pendrake. I think that we're just having a style of communication breakdown. You are correct. The way that the model is highlighted and shaded should dictate to the judge's imagination what you're trying to do. Exactly. However, once the judge understands what you're trying to do, if the way you've highlighted and shaded it isn't consistent with that, then, because that happens all the time, somebody may start out with a great OSL effect, but then they don't know how to put it across the whole model. They don't understand that it should fade. They miss a part that should be otherwise highlighted by that light source, stuff like that. So there's enough there for the judge to understand what they're trying to do, but they haven't executed it well. And in that case, the judge is free to mark them down a bit if they're painting at the highest standard. Because what they tried to execute, they didn't follow through on. But it is certainly not the case that just because you painted the model, if you fell down and didn't highlight a thing just because you either missed it or you just chose not to because you didn't think that it would be highlighted, the judge can still mark you down for that if you're otherwise obviously trying this light source. It's not like, if you're in a competition, if you're at home, you can paint the model however the heck you want. Nobody cares. As long as you're happy with it, that's the only thing that matters. But if you're in a competition, other people will judge you. That's kind of the point. So if you are like, well, but I meant to do that. I meant that the light wasn't going to go there because of XYZ. And the judge doesn't understand that. That can happen. And it can be judge error too. But then maybe there was a problem on both sides, right? Expectation and like you showing clearly what you were trying to do. It's a thing. It's a thing. Yeah. Someone who understands proper lighting can spot the technical mistakes. Exactly. Yup. And there are certainly times I've done OSL where I've been like gotten lazy in the later parts, right? Like bounce light and stuff like that. I'll be like, oh man, that's too much work. And a judge would be right to mark me down for that if I entered that model. I think we all like can spot the weaknesses in our own pieces, unless we're trying something new that we've never tried before with the OSL, for example. OSL is a weird one. Anyway, I'm sorry if we're still not understanding your point, Pendrake. I tried to read that last comment of yours like particular, and I think maybe there's just a breakdown. I'm not sure where the breakdown is. Because you as the artist are the one in charge of the piece for sure. But if you are trying to carry off an effect and it isn't successful because the judge knows more about lighting than you, then that's valid. That's a valid reason for the judge to mark you down. There we go. Did you take David's OSL course at ReaperCon, Slayer? OSL is one of those things that you start out with something very simple and then just slowly expand on your knowledge base. The way that light interacts with the environment is really complex. It's very, very difficult to do it to like its top level on a miniature. But you can always start and then improve. And if you took David's class, you've got a good foundation. Because he talks about all the rules that light follows. And if you didn't take his class, you should go to lightminiatures.com, his website, and read his OSL tutorial with his alchemist model, which will lay out some basics. And no, just do the one class a day. Just try to target. I mean, you never know. I still wouldn't do more, just unless you're really, really like a sponge. And even then, if you leave an hour or more, a couple hours between, then you can do 2 classes in a day. But really, the hard part is getting into David's class because he's sold out a lot. But he is, I think, going to do 2 of them next year. Yes, there you go. Quindy's got the OSL tutorial. So read through that, and it'll break your brain a little bit. Are you doing very simple? I hope you start out with very simple OSL. Like, usually the easiest thing is a glowing object right up next to the model. Or something like I did with Mouseling, where you've got the light source coming from really one direction, and you can really just kind of turn the model and see where your light should be hitting. Okay, yeah. So glowy stone is one of the easiest things. Perfect. Good deal. No, I get what you're saying, Pendrake. I just don't entirely agree. Because I think that with mini painting, it's sure you could have a wonky thing like that. But I think most people aren't trying to intentionally reproduce something that looks incorrect. Most people are trying to make the model look correct. I don't think that if you have one wonky part on a model, that the judge is going to automatically drop you a medal. But I think that if throughout the model there are inconsistencies, especially if the judge can see like that you always, like that you fail to do bounce light always, or that you fail to execute on X or Y, then I feel like, yep, yeah, and Quindy has a point, yep. This is competition. If you don't want to have to deal with that, then don't enter. But I like to think of it as a challenge to convey an effect. Because remember, Pendrake, there's another side to that. There's a beneficial side to it. Like those judges that, as you say, are thinking within that box, that predictable realism box, are also helping people who come to enter who want to learn to paint that way, right? They're catching the mistakes. Then that person can be made aware of those mistakes, and that helps them to like paint, like, because most painters, what you're describing is something that I think only the very top level of painter would do. Would be to produce flaws, consistent flaws in a way as to like make a confounding or interesting or visually weird light source. Like I could see trying that on a Cthulhu model, for example. There's definitely places where that would be workable, right? That it would even make sense. But I think most painters at these competitions are looking to get better at lighting without doing the mind-bending stuff that you might be able to do. Yes, and I'd say, Mr. Alfheim, that you are like right there. And I think that for what Pendrake is describing, for that effect to be really successful, it will have to be cool. And it will need to be consistent so that the judge needs to see that, like, okay, they're trying to bend rules here. Like, the light is weird here next to this monster, and it's weirder the closer you get, so this monster is bending reality, for example. That would be a really hard effect to pull off, by the way. Like I said, top 1% of miniature painters in the world could maybe do what Pendrake is describing. And you would need the right model for it. But you could do it. You would just need to actually make it evident what you were doing. We run into that. I mean, I've run into that as a judge. Just not understanding what the person is trying to do because the model doesn't give me the information. But there are always ways you can introduce that information to let your viewer, because you've got to give your viewer context, right? That's part of being an artist. Like, if you really want people to get what you're doing, you need to give them the tools to see that within the piece. But yeah, if you did something really cool with bended light, if you were painting a monster, there used to be a monster in Werewolf role-playing game that was Nexus Crawler that essentially bent reality the closer you got to it. Like, it had that ability. And if you were painting one of those, I could see where you might, like, everything close to it, you could actually, like, model so that it's kind of cubist or stretchy or Salvador Dali. Like, it's, like, all out of proportion. And then you would do weird lighting, like, really funky lighting everywhere within the Nexus Crawler's, like, you know, like, area of effect. And then do real lighting on the outside of it. And that would be freaking cool. And it would also really break you as a painter. Really break you. Same with Cthulhu monsters, right? There's some Cthulhu monsters that just bend reality. I just can't think of which ones, like, right now. But that would be a case where you could do that, I think, successfully, because it would be, you would be able to communicate to the viewer just with image alone why it was doing that. I think that, though, this also falls into the whole, what Pendrake's talking about, also falls into the preconceived notions thing, which David brings up a lot, and which we as judges, like, we try to get away from it, but it's hard sometimes unless, again, the painter is good enough that you really can tell that that's what they're going for. So one example is comic book style. When comic book models first started showing up, like Jessica Bathory's stuff, and is probably the first one. Like, there was a real question whether, in my mind, whether the judges were going to give it the high level it deserved of recognition, but she did actually get golds on those models. It was a very different technique. It was a totally different approach. We hadn't seen it on large scale models before. You know, lots of cross hatching, lots of, like, you know, just the way that comic book is. Like, if you look at a comic book model, painted model, and then you look at a really well blended and textured model next to it, you might be tempted to think that the blended and textured model took more work, and you might be wrong. Hi there, Bubba. Depending on the painter, right? Kiki would like to throw in her 2 cents. Her 2 cents. 2 cents. This is the leather straps, Pendrake. On the axe. There's a leather straps holding on this skull onto the axe. So like that little, so you can see the skull on the bottom and the top. So it was a good place to put an accent color. Right. Yeah. I mean, judges are mortal. They're just mortal. Put yourself in the role of a judge and then realize how hard it is. I would say there are plenty of times where somebody has tried something really new and cool and whatever judge, wherever, like, didn't get it right. And that's just the way it is. And you either decide to move on or you decide not to show there anymore. Like my blue werewolf, who got silver instead of gold because they couldn't wrap their heads around a blue werewolf. It just happens. Like, it just does. And don't take it personally when it does. The universe is not personal. Like, it's just, they judged it the way they judged it. And it is, like, just the hazard of entering a competition. So that's why I think it's, like, I have the win with the mindset of, I'm going to use this as a motivator to try things I haven't tried before, to do better than I've done before, things like that. Because that way, if you succeed in pushing yourself, you've already won. And then entering in the competition, you're just like, we'll see what it does, or if it doesn't, who cares? Because you're not there for that. You're there to show off the model because you hope other people will think that it's as cool as you think it is. But I don't care about winning anymore. Like, if I never won another medal or trophy, I'd be perfectly happy. When we go to World Expo at some point, or we go over to Monte San Savino, I'm going to bring stuff that I think I've done that's freaking cool. I'm not going to expect to win. I'm not going to expect to even, to get a gold medal. I'm not going to expect any of that. Because my whole point will have been motivating myself to do something cool for that show in the first place. And I think that's where my happy level is. Me, competition not being one of my big things that drives me. I know everyone knows werewolves aren't blue. Yeah. Not executing well. Yep, Agent Marvel, exactly. And that's where it lives, right? And a good judge can tell what you were trying to do, give you cred for doing it, but still mark you down for not executing well. Like, exactly. So it's the nature of competitions. And they're always going to be subjective. Just the way it is. It's just best to make your peace with it early on, and then you can just enjoy it. Then you can just enjoy going to the competition, showing people your awesome stuff, meeting with friends, making new friends, complaining because you didn't get a medal or something. I don't know. I guess some people like to do that. Not me. But yeah, it comes down to what do you get out of it, right? What are you looking to get out of your painting? But yeah, judges are judges. That's what it is. And I'm glad that there is a judge like Matt out there. And if David ever judged a high-level competition, he would probably be hard too on people who tried to execute lighting effects and didn't do them very well. Because he also has that sense, right? He'd be able to tell it was wrong. It felt wrong. So I'm putting some white underpainting, and then I'm putting the red over the top. Well, it might explain why my blue werewolf looks so very angry, Turgeon. If he has a case of silver poisoning, that would explain it. I think I got mad at the time on that competition, by the way, but afterwards it gave me a good perspective about it afterwards. It's like, you know what? I decided that it was dumb for me to try to enter a competition for ego. That it only made sense for me to enter competitions to just show all the cool things I've been doing. And from that point on, I enjoyed every competition I entered. So that makes, you can see how much brighter the white underpainting makes the red up here. I do need to shade a little bit more down here where obviously you can see where the zenith black was, because you can see how it's naturally darker. It is. I mean, like I said, I was annoyed at the time and I pretty much just decided not to enter their competition again. Slayer. That was pretty much the way I voted. I was like, all right, this is kind of a crock, but... And then I realized that it was dumb of me to be feeling personally affronted by it. Is it annoying? Sure. But so what? What does it matter? It really doesn't. It especially doesn't if you just go into it with the mindset of just enjoying the process. So I grew up after that a bit. I think I matured a bit in my mindset after that, because after I got annoyed, then I got to thinking about it. And then I got more of a healthy mindset about competition than I had had. Because I do have a competitive streak, and I don't really like my competitive streak most days. I don't like the person I am when I let it take over. And so learning to, refocus my competitive streak on kind of just my own execution, get competitive with myself. Okay, we're going to do this better than we've ever done it before, right? When I'm in the actual painting process has really helped my mindset and just the way that I feel about competing, competitions, putting my work out there in general. That's you. Oh, time check. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you guys have seen Blue Werewolf. I have shown you Blue Werewolf before. I still keep him, you know. He's a little dusty. Blue Werewolf. You know Blue Werewolf. Here, back up. He's big. He's a chonk because he's an old rackham piece. This is when I was not nearly as good as at NMM. I keep him because he's an example of my old work. So my old work, the work that I would, this is the stage I was at right when I started at Reaper. But they, yeah. So I'm very happy with him and how he turned out in general. And I've definitely gotten better at hair. I've gotten better at a bunch of stuff, you know, since I did this model, NMM. But I was still pretty decent at this stage. Like, I like Wolfie, and I still like him, even though I know, oh, the NMM could be better, even though I'm like, oh, I didn't highlight the hair consistently with the light source. I didn't understand light sourcing that much. So you can see how he's, like, highlighted the same, even though he's bending over, where now I would not do that. I have, I think, another one of this model, and I really should sit down and paint a new one to show the difference. Because I always tell you guys, right, to hold on to your first models, because then you can see how much you've improved. So I bet it would be pretty eye-opening if I painted another one of him in the same color scheme, but how I would paint him now, and see, like, how crazy, because you can still improve, right? Most people would be super happy to be painting like this. But I bet you'd see the evolution, right? Yeah, I do like a totally blue diorama, Pendrake, yeah. But yeah, it's because I know I've improved, right? And it would be an actual sign of like how much I've improved. So anyway, that's for someday. But that's the Blue Werewolf. Hi, Kiki. Yeah, Kiki. I think it's time. Oh my, I've got a dog. I've got a dog invasion. Also, I have like maids coming later, so I have to like clean up the house. Oh no, Kiki. We have to clean up the house. Oh no. Yes, pre-cleaning. You know how we do. Because I want it clean for when the dog sitter comes take care of the keeks. Yeah. Right. Mostly you'd see an improvement in lighting, Big Apple. You'd see an improvement in my NMM, and you'd see an improvement in the lighting. And those are the two things that I feel like I have very much improved on over the years. But, oh well, Kiki wants her walk, so I will, and we've gotten red on most of the places that I wanted it. So we're getting there. Technically, I still need to figure out these van braces, but I will write down the colors that I used. I'll put them on the card. And we can get away. And tomorrow, speaking of red, a totally different red, we are back to Technicolor Ed. He's not nearly as bright as he looks on the camera. I promise you. I've been thinking more and more about doing like a design down here that lets us do like doing a black design down here that what lets us do flames at the bottom. Because I haven't done flames in a long time. So we'll see. We might do that. I just have to make sure that I want... The problem with this is all the little folds. But we'll talk about it tomorrow. So yeah, we're painting Ed tomorrow. Come on back. Hang out. Paint Ed or not. And I will see you guys later. Thanks for being here. Thanks for chatting. All right? Bye-bye.